If you think about all of the irrigation structures that the early pioneers built when they first came to Utah, I think they recognized that water was a scarce resource from the get-go.
As the climatologist, I'm responsible for keeping the climate records for the state. We've been collecting since 1956 here. Up on campus, we've been collecting data for over 100 years.
Here at the wastewater treatment plant, our project is to evaluate how well do the treatment plants remove personal care products, pharmaceuticals, and microbial contamination. The main concern is making sure the people that might get exposed are not exposed to excessive risk.
Water basins in Utah are over allocated. We're looking at water banking other places, and the keys to their success, water banks have to fulfill a particular purpose and meet a particular need, and those vary across the state.
The quality of air that we can have here in Utah can impact your health. We need cars, we need industry, but let's make sure that they don't damage our environment and damage our health.
Ammonia plays an important role in driving our high particulate levels that we see during the winter. So we have these sensors deployed at 40 different locations. This is for measuring ammonia, and this is for measuring hydrochloric acid. Once we identify where ammonia is coming from, we can use that information to inform policy.
We're really at the north end of the area of the Uinta Basin with the most industry development. We measure ozone, we measure oxides of nitrogen, particulate matter, and really our group's mission is to do research that helps industry and regulators make good decisions.
The work Utah State and Weber State did together is to educate drivers. So we had 90 vehicles that was a kind of a reflection of the vehicles you find in the street. And then we can plot out and see when the car was cold, the catalytic converter didn't work. So the emissions were high. And then when the cat got heated up, the emissions dropped. The goal is to reduce the time between cold and normal operating temperature.
We are growing rapidly, and it really changes the footprint of our urban activities on the land, and those things have consequences.
40 to 45% of the entire population of the state lives in 4 counties. So all this pressure for more outdoor recreation experiences is right there on the wildland-urban interface. And what we're doing is trying to identify where are those areas that currently aren't used, and how can we actually start to disperse use away from those high concentration areas that are starting to experience high levels of crowding.
Think of Monroe Mountain. Aspen trees have been disappearing. Till now they are only about 1/3 of the landscape that they occupied historically. So by serving as important science and social intermediaries, we're able to achieve a level of trust and legitimacy that, quite frankly, the federal agencies couldn't have.
I always say that these prime ag land fields grow great houses, but you can't go backward. And so we've gobbled up a lot of the prime ag land and forced agriculture to the sort of marginalized perimeters.
Our job and role as designers and planners is to create examples of environmentally sensitive, low-impact development that's pleasing to live in, that gives people a quality of life that they're excited about.
Research Landscapes. This is a collaborative effort that we do to provide informed context and connections and conversations on Utah's land, water, and air. I'm Lisa Barreau. I'm the Vice President for Research at Utah State University. I think all of us in this room recognize how significantly and deeply Utah's landscapes affect all of us. We know that they're crucial to our growth and survival. We also know that they have significant impacts on our personal well-being and our quality of life. You know, it's interesting, recently I was reading one night a report that came out of a think tank in the Midwest called the Heartland Forward, which is an institute for economic renewal that primarily is looking at the Midwest. But one of the things they did was rank the top 25 cities in the country, metro areas, in terms of the most dynamic metros. And what struck me, looking at that list of 25, was that there were 5 of those in Utah. Okay, 5. From north to south, 5 of the hottest metro areas. And if you looked at why they were hot metro areas in 2021, the factors that came into play were the combination of the good economic prosperity going on, but also the opportunities for outdoor recreation, particularly for those workers who could relocate, work remotely, and then enjoy Utah's landscapes as part of their lifestyle. And so this is something now emerging from COVID that I think additionally adds to the importance of our landscapes and how we interact with them. And so I am just very pleased to say that after 2 years of not being in person, we are once again back at the O.C. Tanner headquarters. We want to thank O.C. Tanner for providing us access to this wonderful space to gather. And I'd also like to specifically thank O.C. Tanner President Dave Peterson. Dave is a great contributor to USU. In addition to working with us on Research Landscapes, he's a member of the USU Board of Trustees and has so much personal investment in the mission of Utah State University. So thank you, Dave Peterson. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us here today. So since we last met in person over 2 years ago, much has changed around Utah State University and our commitment to Utah's land, water, and air. The first thing we want to note is that we now have an institute. The Janet Quinney Lawson Institute for Land, Water, and Air was named in October of last year through a generous donation from the Janet Quinney Lawson Foundation. This gift creates an endowment of core support that will help Utah's scientific groundwork and help us understand and document and manage Utah's natural resources. One of the important next steps for that institute is going to be the naming of a director, which will be announced in the next few weeks. We're also happy to remind many of you that late last year we delivered the first major product of the institute, which was a report to the governor on the state of Utah's land, water, and air. This report included a chapter, which is actually on your table in front of you, that relates specifically to outdoor recreation and featured some of the unique and exceptional research that's been conducted by USU's Institute for Outdoor Recreation and Tourism. Our presenter today is Jordan Smith. Jordan is the head of that institute, the director, and was the lead author on that key chapter. We've printed that out for you so that you can take it home and spend some time thinking about Jordan's research and its impact. But first, before we hear more from Jordan, I'd like to introduce Representative Doug Owens. Representative Owens is a native of Utah. He was born and raised in Salt Lake City, graduated from the University of Utah, and then later went on to pursue law at Yale Law School. As an attorney, he's, for more than 3 decades, worked in resolving complex commercial, environmental, and employment issues. Importantly, he's the founder of Utah Outdoor Partners, a nonprofit organization launched to raise awareness about the value of Utah's outdoors and promote the creation of parks and other recreational infrastructure to keep pace with population growth in the state. His and Jordan's paths cross quite frequently as they work together on various things, including the Utah Outdoor Adventure Commission and the Bears Ears Visitor Center Advisory Committee. And with that, I'd like to invite Doug to make a few remarks.
Thank you, Vice President Moreau. Thank you for having me in today. I'm glad to take a minute to talk about this really important issue. Outdoor recreation, which really to me means that what are we going to do to maintain our lifestyle with the increasing population growth? You can wait a long time these days if you want to go up Little Comwood on a powder day. Or even Little Mill Creek near where I live, try to go on a busy Saturday. It's difficult to find a parking spot. These are big issues that we're facing, and it really is I see it as an existential crisis, really. So I want to turn the time over quickly to Jordan Smith, but I do want to make a few comments first, beginning with his appearance in that video. Did you see that hair that he had, that long hair? It's very impressive. It's now migrated to his face. Either way, it's impressive, Jordan. I couldn't do either one. I do appreciate what USU is doing with its research. These are cutting-edge issues, and as I say, I think it's critical to our continuing identity as a state where we are able to get out easily. You'll often hear that outdoor recreation accounts for about 10% of Utah's economy, but that's just the direct employment. It's really a much bigger story. Proximity to outdoor recreation is a huge driver for most of the economy, and that's the point this Utah Outdoor Partners nonprofit is trying to make. That if we want to maintain a vibrant economy, we've got to take better care of our outdoor recreation potential. We teamed up with another university, which I hesitate to name, but the Chem Gardner Institute at the University of Utah, to do a study surveying 50 of Utah's fastest growing businesses, none of which had any tie to outdoor recreation. And they asked them, what led you to locate in this state, or to remain in the state if you were here for a long time? The second most important factor was access to recreation opportunity, and the third factor was Utah's outdoor lifestyle. So, those factors were way more important than the traditional things like tax rates and regulatory environment, proximity to customers. All those things are fading into a distant background now, and companies are looking for something else. And I'll point out one interesting example, Lucid Software. It's, you've probably all driven by their building on I-15 down in Sandy, a great big and successful tech company. The CEO there, Carl's son, put that company in Utah against the advice of his investors early on who wanted it in Silicon Valley. He put it there because he likes to ski before work. And he gets his turns in and can still get to the office and run a successful company. The story doesn't even end there, though. I talked to the head of engineering there. They hire a lot of engineers and they compete nationally with big employers like Apple and Facebook. And they get a competitive advantage in hiring engineers by looking at the resumes and seeing who puts their personal interest, that personal interest paragraph at the bottom of your resume. If people put backcountry skiing, camping, fly fishing, and things like that, they know they've got a recruiting advantage in going after that person, and they use that very actively to recruit to the state. People know this kind of stuff anecdotally that I'm telling you, but I think it's important that we do gather some specific data. And I noticed that Utah's tech sector is growing very rapidly, and now 1 in 7 jobs in the state is a tech, or directly or indirectly related to tech. So on another study, teamed up again with Chem Gardner Institute and Silicon Slopes to survey 300 employees in the tech sector and ask them why they are living here. Of the people in the survey who moved to Utah, 79% said that outdoor recreation was a very significant factor in their decision to move to the state. That was 12 points more than people who said salary was an important factor. For those in the survey who were returning to the state, who had been in Utah and left and came back, 82% said outdoor recreation was a very important factor in their decision to return to the state, which ranked ahead of family, which only got 75%. So there's a lot of disappointed mothers-in-law out there, but people are coming home for the skiing, and that actually echoes my own story. I moved back east for a few years and worked at a fancy pants law firm in Washington, D.C., and then one day found myself on a flight from LA to Chicago. And I fell asleep, as I usually do, and then I woke up and looked down, and it looked a lot like Cedar City at the base of Cedar Mountain. I thought, that's got to be it. And sure enough, we went up the hill. The flight path took us up the hill and looked down sooner, and then in a couple minutes on Cedar Breaks, and then Panguitch Lake, where I kind of felt like I grew up. My father came out of Panguitch, and I grew up going to family reunions and hunting and fishing down there. And I had this immense pull to come home, and that connection to the landscape, and decided on that flight that we were going to get back home as soon as we could. I had enough of driving 3 or 4 hours trying to get to any kind of outdoor rec potential in the Washington, D.C. area. I'd like to just cite a couple of comments from that study of the tech survey, the kind of feeling that's out there in Utah. One of the comments said, "I'm from the Midwest. The only outdoor recreation I had was walking through a cornfield." And you got to keep in mind, this was done about a year ago in the early part of COVID. One person said, "Getting outside is the only thing that makes this turd of a year bearable." I'm a Manhattan refugee and a Utah returnee. I can access everything within 5 to 40 minutes, allowing me to recreate during the week. That's just a huge thing. There's really no other urban area in the western United States that has the immediate proximity to the recreation potential that the Wasatch Front does. In Utah, the outdoors is much more accessible. There's often a cell signal if you want to post up and work from a rock somewhere. But the comments hit some sad notes. Utah used to be great. It has become incredibly crowded, especially along the Wasatch Front. #hypergrowth. And this ironic comment, "Utah is not good at all. Please do not move here. Stay where you are." So like all of you, I feel deeply connected to Utah's landscapes, and they contribute to a great quality of life. And I want you to know Utah, the leadership is doing some great things where outdoor rec is concerned. There's been amazing stuff in the last 2 years. And I would single out the Speaker of the House, Brad Wilson, as a particular visionary and mover and shaker in this realm. His legislation led to the creation of the Outdoor Adventure Commission. We have some members here, and Professor Smith will be talking about that. But over the next 2 years, they'll be surveying where our outdoor rec resources are and where they need to be developed, where the gaps are, what we can do, where we need to put more trails, parks, campgrounds, and that kind of thing. There have been 2 new state parks created last year, and this year, a terrific funding mechanism was set up for outdoor recreation, a real groundbreaking thing. 1% of sales tax revenue to the state now gets diverted automatically to outdoor recreation, and that's estimated to should be $30 million. Well, population growth and crowding are big issues. I think there's real appreciation in the legislature for those issues and a willingness to keep on it, to continue addressing them. And just a couple things I'm working on in particular, looking at opening up the Oakers for more recreation potential, working on establishing a mechanism for fostering public-private partnerships that can build recreation resources. You know, I kind of imagine the world where a company might think, hey, if we would be willing to contribute to connect our employees to a bike trail system and pay for that. And if the state would partner with them, I think it could encourage an immense amount of private investment into outdoor recreation. So I think we need to start partnering up bigger in that way, and both the taxpayers and the corporate citizen can feel good about leveraging support from the other side of things. So despite some big challenges, I think there's a lot of good reason for optimism. And now I'll turn to introducing Professor Smith. He is the director of the Institute of Outdoor Rec and Tourism at Utah State. He earned his PhD in Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management with minors in both Geospatial Information Systems and Sociology from NC State. He completed both his master's and undergraduate degrees at Utah State University. His work uses social media analytics and geospatial technologies to develop an understanding of how outdoor recreation is changing across the American West. His goal is to provide natural resource professionals, elected officials, private industry, and the general public with a scientifically grounded understanding of how best to manage outdoor recreation. And he's worked with me on a couple of studies relating to Bears Ears National Monument and the potential for a visitor center, which has been very interesting work. But with that, I will turn it over to Professor Smith.
Thanks, Dr. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, everyone, for making it out today. I think there's something ironic about the first Research Landscapes Forum in 2 years after we've all had an amazing chance to be outside, that we get a focus on outdoor recreation and we have to come back inside. As Doug mentioned, I run the Institute of Outdoor Recreation and Tourism up at Utah State. We were created back in 1998 by the Utah State Legislature to provide data, to provide information and resources to local municipalities, counties, our state agencies, as well as our federal partners, in how to best manage outdoor recreation across the state and how to best deal with the trade-offs that come from outdoor recreation. We realize that despite all that we hear about all the benefits of outdoor recreation, there's also a lot of drawbacks and a lot of difficulties with managing outdoor recreation across the state. You're gonna hear about some of those difficulties today. Before I talk about some of the specific projects that we've worked on at Utah State, I want you to think about the most recent outdoor recreation experience that you've had. Hopefully it's within Utah. When was the last time you had a chance to get out and go camping with your friends or with your family? When was the last time you had a chance to go hiking, maybe alone in a wilderness area? When was the last time you had a chance to visit a rural portion of the state, gaze up at the night sky and feel a sense of awe, feel a sense of a connection to something vast and much bigger than yourself? Well, these are all outdoor recreation experiences. And while the vast majority of these experiences are brought to you by Mother Nature, they really are truly thought out and planned in many ways by land managers, by outdoor recreation planners, by city officials, who really think about what outdoor recreation experiences should be provided in what specific locations. What should people have the opportunity to participate in? And what are the ways that we can make those opportunities occur in ways that they're not in conflict with one another, or that they're not in conflict with other land uses, like grazing, or mineral development, or timber production. The development of outdoor recreation experiences really starts with setting aside our natural or semi-natural landscapes for the preservation of these types of experiences, so that we can preserve not only the opportunity to have areas for outdoor recreation, but also these other ecosystem services that are provided by natural landscapes. Water quality, the ability to have clean air, carbon sequestration, all these things that come from the conservation of natural or semi-natural landscapes. Outdoor recreation experiences also come from a patchwork of management and planning documents that really set the specific guidance on what outdoor recreation opportunities can be provided on very specific pieces of land, where trails should be placed actually on the landscape, and like I said before, where those outdoor recreation opportunities or where those specific experiences can happen so they're not in conflict with other types of land uses. And even within the broad realm of outdoor recreation activities, the ways that those outdoor recreation activities can happen so that they don't conflict with one another. So that outdoor recreation that might be motorized doesn't occur in the same locations where outdoor recreation that's non-motorized, that's sensitive to motorized recreation, doesn't occur in the same place. This patchwork of planning and regulatory documents, even though it's fairly dry, a lot of us don't like planning efforts, is really essential to making sure that we have outdoor recreation experiences across the state. Outdoor recreation experiences are also dependent upon the maintenance of these areas, not just by local municipal and state organizations, but also by the volunteer groups who might be supporting a specific user group or a specific activity, but they often put in hundreds, maybe thousands of hours to maintain our trails and our campgrounds and our bathroom facilities so that we can have these good experiences when we go outside. Utah is fairly unique in our access to outdoor recreation opportunities. Using the state park system as an example, almost 97% of our state's population lives within 60 minutes of a state park. You have access to a state park within 60 minutes of your front door. This is just one example. We're also fairly unique in that we have a vast diversity of outdoor recreation opportunities to participate in, and a vast array of landscapes across which those activities occur. As I mentioned, we have these state parks, which we all have great access to. We have 46 state parks now. We also have 38 million acres of state and federal lands that is accessible for outdoor recreation. 23,000 miles of trail that's open for motorized and non-motorized use. We also have 7 national forests. If you're here along the Wasatch Front, chances are you recreate on the Uinta-Wasatch Cache National Forest, probably most frequently, if not exclusively. But there are 7 national forests within the state that at least have some portion of their boundaries within the state. We also have 6 national monuments. These include the large landscape scale national monuments like Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante. I'm going to talk a little bit later about our work in Bears Ears. We also have a lot of these other very small national monuments, like Timpanogos Cave, and Hovenweep, and Rainbow Bridge. We also have 5 national parks. And if you're not very familiar with outdoor recreation, or if maybe you haven't thought about it in a while, try to think of all 5 national parks in your head right now. Usually, if you're not too familiar with it, or if you haven't thought about it for a while, there's one that's out there. It's like, oh yeah, that's the last one I always keep forgetting about. But it'll come to you, or you might have to Google it, but I won't tell anybody. Utah is also pretty unique in how active our population is in outdoor recreation. We have 72% of our state's population that participates in outdoor recreation. This is no surprise. We all kind of have some sort of activity, or we often even identify each other by the types of activities we participate in. My wife's a trail runner. I like to get out and bike. We all have these specific activities that often kind of define who we are. Well, having this many people participate in outdoor recreation doesn't just mean that those individuals who participate get to benefit from the psychological and physiological benefits, have the psychological and physiological benefits that come from outdoor recreation. It also means that the state benefits as a whole economically from this participation. In 2017, the most recent year that we have really good data statewide for, outdoor recreation generated $12.3 billion in consumer spending. That's spending on gas to get to your outdoor recreation destination. That's spending on food that you're taking with you. That's spending on the gear that it takes to participate. That's $7,800 for every man, woman, and child whoever steps foot on a trail within the state. It's a significant amount of money. This also generates a significant amount of money for the wages and the earnings of Utah's residents. $3.9 billion in labor income was generated by outdoor recreation activity. This also translates into a lot of sales tax revenue, or state and local tax revenue. So when you have a local municipality or a county that's thinking about whether or not outdoor recreation really is a good investment when it comes to return on investment, whether or not it actually generates a lot of money locally for back into that economy, well, in 2017, it generated $737 million in state and local tax revenue. And if you have the infrastructure in place, you have the lodging facilities, the restaurants, the gear shops, the outfitters and guides that are locally based, a lot of that money does stay locally, and you're actually able to capture a lot of those economic benefits. At Utah State, we're involved in outdoor recreation management in a variety of different ways, spanning everything from data collection to understand trends in outdoor recreation participation, to collaboration efforts where we're helping agencies and local governments share resources and information, to planning efforts where we're involved in strategic discussions about the ways that outdoor recreation should be developed within the state. And I'm going to talk about each of these areas in a little bit of detail, highlighting specific projects that we've been involved in along the way. I'll start off with data and some of the data that we have collected to understand trends in outdoor recreation across the state, not only spatial, but also temporal trends. I'm going to start off by talking about a project where we use data to understand where outdoor recreation is happening and participation is changing. This map comes from a study that was done a few years ago by one of my formal doctoral students, Hongqiao Zheng. It's funded by Utah State Extension, where we're using social media data instead of using data on the number of people that pass through a gate, or the number of people that purchase a pass to get into a specific area, or the number of people that get a permit to float down a river. We're using the social media posts that you're all making. I would say most of you are making. There might be a few holdouts that don't have a social media account, but you're sharing your experiences with your friends and family on Facebook or Instagram, and all that information has a geotag coordinate associated with it. Wherever you took that picture, wherever you shared that image from, we knew exactly where it was. So that amounts to millions and millions of images that we're able to harvest and understand where people are participating in outdoor recreation when those images are taken outside. So we were able to generate a map like this, which shows heat maps, or a heat map of the entire state. So we can understand participation in one jurisdiction, like a national park, relative to participation in another area that might be managed by a completely different agency. So we can see these broad trends. You can see here, maybe a lot of these areas that are very dark red that indicate higher areas of outdoor recreation participation are areas that you would expect. Our 5 national parks, the Central Wasatch here, very heavily used, but maybe also a lot of other areas that you typically don't think about. Data like this and methods that we're using now allow us to zoom in and look at individual areas of the state in a little bit more detail. We're able to look at the southeastern portion of the state in this example and see exactly where areas like I noted before, arches and canyonlands that do get a lot of use, but also other areas like along the I-70 corridor, which are getting a lot of use. People are getting outside and participating in outdoor recreation there. But there might not be a lot of infrastructure there, there might not be a lot of resources there for people to actually benefit from the time that they're actually spending outside. We can zoom in even further and look at individual counties. In this example here, I show Grand County in the area around Arches National Park to see a lot of the areas where we know that outdoor recreation is occurring. We know that there's a lot of spillover and a lot of dispersion, a lot of displacement from our national parks. Where's that actually going? In areas around national parks, it's spilling over into county land, into BLM land. But those agencies really don't have a good way to capture how much outdoor recreation is happening so that they can effectively allocate resources to better understand which trails they should manage on their lands, which areas they should strategically invest in. Data like this allows us to kind of overcome that hurdle of them having to actually go out and collect that data so we can better understand where those areas are and where priorities should be made. In this project, we went around and showed this data to local municipal agencies, city leaders, outdoor recreation planners, city managers, and showcased the top 10 outdoor recreation visited locations within each of the regions and within individual counties, with the goal of starting a discussion about, well, now that you know these are the top 10 locations where outdoor recreation is occurring, what are the challenges that come from knowing that those are the most heavily visited destinations? What are the opportunities that come from knowing from those are the most heavily visited destinations? So an example here of the way we're using data to start some discussions and really use data as a backdrop to better understand the ways that these local municipalities can make strategic investments. We also use data to better understand how outdoor recreation is changing over time. In the beginning of 2020, we started to track outdoor recreation participation in municipal park and recreation lands across the state. In this graph, you can see how outdoor recreation participation has changed. That bottom line on the graph, that 0, is our baseline, and referred to as like pre-pandemic levels. You can see as we start to peak up in the months after the beginning of the pandemic, March, April, May of 2020, visitation to local park and recreation facilities had doubled. By the middle of the summer, it almost quadrupled. You can kind of see that big spike there at the end of May, that's Memorial Day. But then since we've kind of returned to a fairly normal baseline. But again, ways that we're using data to better understand outdoor recreation trends across broad geographic ranges like the entire state. We can also use data to understand outdoor recreation issues at a very small spatial scale. In a recent study that's currently ongoing, we're highlighting and trying to understand how outdoor recreation is happening in some of our most used destinations. In this example, we're working on a project with the Central Wasatch Commission, an alliance of government agencies across the Salt Lake Valley, and tracking outdoor recreation participation at high elevation lakes in the Central Wasatch. Late in 2021, we were able to look at high elevation lakes in Little Cottonwood Canyon, tracking outdoor recreation use not only through existing trail counters that had already been in place across the area, but also through passively collected mobile location data. So in this study, we're not using social media posts, so not you sharing your information on a social media platform, but just having your phone with you. All that information that is tracked on all of our iPhones is getting collected by those companies and being harvested by researchers on the back end to better understand where people are going, how much time they're spending outside. In this study, you can see on the right, we've actually started to quantify some of these trends at these high elevation lakes, the 4 lakes that we've looked at in Little Cottonwood Canyon, White and Red Pine, as well as Secret and Lake Catherine. Some of the numbers that we're seeing there might not be a surprise to a lot of the people that recreate up Little Cottonwood Canyon. But we saw over 800 average daily trip counts to Secret Lake in 2021. Over a month, and this is in the summer, that's about 30,000 trips up to Secret Lake in 1 month. So these numbers are absolutely astonishing, but maybe not surprising if you know how much use these areas get. We're also trying to quantify the conditions of the trails that happen. So we know that outdoor recreation is a big issue in Little Cottonwood Canyon, What's its associated impact on the natural landscapes? In this figure on the left, you see how we've classified the trail conditions of informal trails up around these high elevation lakes. We classify them on a rating scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is a relatively good trail, narrow, very solid, developed as it should be. There's not a lot of erosion going on. And 5 is really poor condition trail with exposed roots, a lot of erosion. And you can kind of see a lot of these informal trails really are already starting to experience a lot of degradation, or they have already experienced a lot of degradation. So again, an area where this is associated with a lot of the maps that are specific to each individual lake can help guide management actions at these individual areas. We also use data to better understand the environments that drive outdoor recreation. In a study that was done by another former doctoral student of mine, Emily Wilkins, in the Climate Adaptation Science program at Utah State, we looked at the rise in mean minimum temperature at all 14 ski resorts within Utah during the ski season to understand how these ski resorts are adapting to warming conditions in the winter months. And we saw, as you can see in the graph here, this is the mean minimum temperature just for the ski season. Mean minimum temperature during the ski season is very important because it's what is required to actually make snow and make snow stick or keep the snow that you actually have on the ground. And you can see that the warming temperatures or the warming trend across all 14 ski resorts within Utah. We paired these data with interviews with resort managers and found that a lot of them already knew about this trend, and they for a long time have started to adapt their operations away from ski sports industries and into these shoulder season operations of offering services that facilitate mountain biking activities or activities that are completely unrelated, might be more focused on the resort operations itself. At Utah State, we're also involved in a lot of collaboration efforts where we're trying to facilitate connections between local municipalities, local governments, their state and federal agencies that they're associated with, to help them better understand the ways that they can conserve the resources that outdoor recreation depends on. One way that we're doing that at Utah State is through our Colorado Plateau and Basin and Range Dark Sky Cooperative. Our dark sky cooperatives are housed at Utah State, and they're meant to facilitate discussions and provide resources to local municipalities, city governments, county governments, local entities that are interested in understanding how they can quantify and assess the extent of local light pollution within their municipalities. What's the night sky friendliness of the local lighting? What are the areas where they can improve lighting so that it doesn't impact local nocturnal wildlife, or that it doesn't impact local outdoor recreation activities that are dependent upon dark night skies, like outdoor photography. The image out here on the right-hand side shows where the Basin and Range and Colorado Plateau are located. Utah contains much of these areas, and as you can see in that map, much of the darkest locations of the lower 48. We're also facilitating these collaborations by bringing data to bear on why some of these collaborations are essential. We've done that in the study that Doug had mentioned, where we've been understanding visitation trends to the area that is now Bears Ears National Monument. We were engaged with the Utah Outdoor Partners, Doug's nonprofit group, to track how outdoor recreation has changed within San Juan County prior to the monument being designated, after the monument was downsized to its previously smaller scale, and then how did it change after it was increased to its current size. And what we found through our analysis is that visitation to San Juan County, the area around Bears Ears National Monument, was already increasing well before the monument was designated. It started to increase around 2012, 2013, around about the same time that much of the visitation started to peak at our national parks and our national monuments as well. It's been a fairly universal trend. But this rise in visitation wasn't the most interesting thing that came out of this study. It was really that this rise in visitation had no association with the economic indicators that we typically see associated with visitation in local communities in San Juan County. It didn't have any association with jobs, employment, the number of establishments in San Juan County. You think about this for a second, well, why might that be? If you're an outdoor recreation an industry leader or a business owner, why would you want to go down and set up shop in Blanding or Monticello or White Mesa if you don't know if that monument's actually going to be there in 4 years? If you don't know there's going to be any way that the cultural resources that monument was there to protect, or the outdoor recreation resources that monument was there to protect, are going to be preserved into the future. So this was really instrumental to putting together some legislation that Doug put together with his co-sponsor in the House, Representative Phil Lyman from San Juan County, to see if there was an opportunity to create a visitor center to serve as an anchor where the cultures that have long called Bears Ears home could be represented, and we could have some stability, some local economic anchor to preserve and to actually benefit from this visitation that was happening across the county. At Utah State, we're also involved in some strategic planning efforts to decide where outdoor recreation should go in the future. I'll talk a little bit about those now. The foremost way that we're doing that is through our Gateway and Natural Amenity Region Initiative, or the NAR Initiative. If you're a skier, you might appreciate the acronym, the NAR Initiative. If you're out to shred in the NAR, that's kind of where it came from. Gateway communities are kind of paramount to the West. I often think everybody kind of knows what a gateway community is. Some of the ones that we have here in Utah, Moab, Park City, Springdale, often spring to mind, but they also include a lot of our other lesser known communities, like Garden City up in Garden City up in Rich County, or Vernal is outside the Ashley National Forest and Dinosaur National Monument. These are also gateway communities that are just on the these are up and coming gateway communities. What our goal is with the NAR initiative is help these up and coming communities, help these communities that are on the cusp of thinking about, well, is outdoor recreation really a strategic investment for my community? Should we really start to put dollars into investing in gear shops or into attracting businesses that serve outdoor recreationists? Or should we start to put our investments into other operations, like maybe traditional operations like agriculture or mining development that have traditionally operated in these communities? A lot of these communities are starting to struggle with these questions. And we think that they can learn from the lessons that other communities have dealt with, have learned from. What can Moab learn from what Jackson Hole did wrong? What can Torrey learn from what Moab is doing right? Or what can Boulder learn from what Torrey and Moab have also tried before but haven't succeeded? We started to track some of these trends and what makes these communities unique, and some of these trends are not surprising to maybe many of you. Here you can see the proportion of employment in some of these gateway communities in what we typically think about as our low-paying leisure and hospitality industries. Here I show Moab, Springdale, and Park City as examples of how such a large proportion of our labor force in a lot of these gateway communities is heavily dependent or heavily employed in these leisure and hospitality industries. This creates a whole issue for where do you put seasonal workers? How do you house them throughout the year when they are employed there? How do you make those places livable for the people who are employed in these areas or employed in these industries where those jobs typically don't pay enough to actually live in these high expensive locations? One solution that we're working on with several gateway communities is starting to think about attracting and diversifying your local workforce away from the leisure and hospitality industries and towards high-tech, or what we call creative class industries. These jobs that are professional and technical services, high-paying jobs, so individuals not only can afford to work in these locations, but also bring in a more diverse perspective to the local economy. I want to finish off with some trends. Oh, we got. No worries. Thanks, Emma. I wanted to finish off with some trends to get us to think about what outdoor recreation in Utah is going to look like in 40 years. I've painted a picture now where we know that visitation is already a big issue in a lot of locations, like here in the central Wasatch or in many of our prime gateway communities. Our population now is just over 3 million people. By 2065, that's expected to double. We also have a population that is exceptionally urban. 75% of our state's population resides within 4 counties: Utah, Weber, Davis, and Salt Lake counties. We know that these urban counties are growing at a much faster rate relative to the rest of the state. Here you can see in this graph how the trends in population growth projected out to 2065 are much steeper for our urban locations along the Wasatch Front relative to our rural locations. So how should this shape the way that we think about investing in outdoor recreation infrastructure? Where should our trails be developed? Should they be developed in areas where most of the population is going to live, or where our current trails are already overcrowded? Or should we think about developing areas of more rural locations of the state? Well, one way we're starting to shape these discussions is through the Outdoor Adventure Commission. It's already been mentioned a couple times, but what we're doing at Utah State through the Outdoor Adventure Commission, which was created in this most recent legislative session and comprises a variety of different individuals from different user groups and representatives from the state legislature, is to use data as a key way to make decisions about where that outdoor recreation infrastructure is developed. Where do we need new state parks? Where do we need staging facilities? Where do we need new trails? Or where do we need modifications to existing outdoor recreation infrastructure that's already overburdened? One of the ways that Utah State is doing that is providing the data and helping to facilitate the discussions that is leading to that development of the Outdoor Recreation Strategic Plan. That's really going to chart the way forward for the ways that the state legislature can and should invest in outdoor recreation over the next 5, 10, and maybe even longer. So I want you to think back to that example that I asked you to think about a little while ago when I started, about your most recent outdoor recreation activity. Whether or not it was hiking with your friends and family, picnicking, or just getting out on a trail by yourself. Try to imagine what that outdoor recreation experience would be like if you had to fight 2 times as many people at the parking lot. If you had to experience 2 times as many people on the trail, or 2 times as many people at the picnic area that you were visiting, or 2 times as many people that were struggling to put up tents. This is what the future of outdoor recreation in Utah looks like. It's going to be much more crowded than it is now. We need the data to better understand where that demand is going to be located so that we can actually allocate supply in ways that alleviates that demand or meets that demand in a smart and strategic way. So not only we can continue to participate in the outdoor recreation opportunities that we continue to enjoy, but our kids can, and our kids can, and their kids can as well. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. Yes.
I was just curious, on the data portion of your presentation, you had the pre-pandemic participation and recreation. And is that a negative trend? I wondered why, how do you have negative participation? I'm just curious.
No, so that the 0 is basically our baseline. So you look at a period of time before the data collection started. We consider that 0. So that's like a normal level. So it would just mean that the participation was below what it was in like March or February of 2020. So it would be a slight decline. Yeah.
Thank you for a great presentation. I would like, could you expand a little bit more about the visitor centers and various years? And also, my understanding, there's also a visitor centers that is managed by Prince of Sierra Mesa, and that's kind of related. And this also because, as you know, that there's right now like this process of co-management between the tribes and the federal agencies in a land that, for a plan that there's no exist because, in 2019, federal agencies elaborated this plan for the reduced area of various years. But right now, there's no plan for the new area when Biden did the restoration. So I would like to know more about that.
Yeah, great question. And I think I might have glossed over it. The outdoor recreation, or excuse me, the Bears Ridge Visitor Center. Yeah. You bet. Sorry. Thank you for calling me out. The question was, he wanted to hear more about the Bears Ridge Visitor Center, how it relates to the current kind of de facto visitor center, at Friends of Cedar Mesa. Friends of Cedar Mesa is a nonprofit group that's based there out of Bluff. It is somewhat related in that, but it's the Bears Ears Visitor Center Advisory Committee is an exploratory group that's looking into the potential of creating the visitor center in some location in San Juan County. And it would be basically a more formal designated visitor center in strong collaboration with those nonprofit groups that have been strong advocates for the Bears Ears Visitor Center for so long. One thing that's really important to note about the advisory committee is that it's comprised solely of 5 members that represent the 5 tribes that have long called the Bears Ears home. So it's completely up to them what locations they would like to consider to have the Bears Ears, the visitor center located, where they would like it located, what representations they would like present in that visitor center, how they would like their local culture and connections to that landscape represented. So I think I can't take any claim for that. That was really all the work of Doug and the work that he had done to put together that legislation. But the data that we had put together showing the absence of any connection to any economic connection to San Juan County relative to the growth in outdoor recreation helped start some of that work. Doug, anything you would like to add to that?
No, I think that hits it. The idea is that the state will pay for the planning of the facility if the tribes decide they want to do it. So it's under discussion with the tribes right now. And then if they come up with a plan and a location, and Jordan Smith is providing additional data down the road about where, if it was located here, what the visitation patterns would be, and if it's there, what the visitation patterns would be. So they'll have information at their fingertips, but it's the tribes that will decide. And then I think that there'd be a lot of potential after it's planned to go get more state, more federal, more philanthropic funding to actually get it built. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, I really appreciate your presentation. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Representative Scott Chu. I live on the edge of Dinosaur National Monument, and we've seen a real increase in visitation to the monument the last number of years. My concern is, and you brought up a good point about people come to Utah. One of the main reasons they come in is the economy and the nearness of recreation. Not too long ago, the legislature had an opportunity to have some young entrepreneurs, I guess you would call them. I'm not the greatest with words, you guys, but came and they explained why they chose to come to Utah. One of the kids was getting a master's up at the U, and the other 2, and all 3 of them had created. They made a lot of money with apps or some sort of a newfangled thing, and they said that recreation was what brought them a big reason they came, which is another thing you said. But the thing that concerned me most about the kids is I asked them, I said, so you guys, you love living within 15 minutes of great recreation. Who's taken care of that part of the state for you? And not one of the 3 of them had an answer for that question. And finally, the young lady that was there, she said, well, I went to a protest last week up at the U. I wonder, how are we going to get the message across that we've got to take care of what we've got out there, and it's not all about dollars. We've got, on the monument, the Dinosaur Monument, we've seen our river recreation go from a free-for-all to an absolute lottery now in order for people to do. I heard on the news that the deer hunt this year is going to be limited because that resource out there. How are we addressing, how is the research lab looking at those things? And I apologize for taking too much time.
No, I think that's a great question. Adequate resources for our federal land management agencies and our local land management agencies, or state land management agencies, I think is a paramount requisite. Like, they can't actually manage these lands unless they have the resources to do so. In a lot of locations, I think that there's some ways that our state has actually stepped up and started to invest in outdoor recreation in ways that other states haven't, in helping not primarily our federal partners, but our county agencies and our local municipalities in providing them the resources to manage outdoor recreation and provide those resources, those opportunities in a high quality way. The first way that I'll mention is Tara and the Office of Outdoor Recreation and Pitt offer our outdoor recreation improvement grants, which go to local municipalities and counties across the state to invest in the management of outdoor recreation resources or the development of outdoor recreation resources. So I think the state legislature in Utah, relative to other Western states, is leaps and bounds ahead of thinking about how we strategically put the money in the hands of the local municipalities and the local counties so that they can better plan for and manage those resources, because oftentimes our federal partners don't have enough budget to do it, or their budgets are fairly stagnant, and even if they could do it, they might not have the ability to, because their efforts are pulled into other directions like fire prevention and different issues like that they're also responsible for. Yeah.
Related to that, so it's kind of a, where's the money come from? But let's say I'm a municipality, or I work for state government, and I want to either, based on your presentation, I want to develop more recreation in my area. I want to, create more economic stuff with recreation, or I want better guidance on management of what I do have. Where would I go for that? Where's the expertise, and how would your institute play into that, or other resources?
Yeah, we do a really good job at trying to quantify outdoor recreation trends and understand where the actual demand is, the supply is needed. But when it actually comes to putting money on the ground and investing in those local communities, our state governor's Office of Economic Opportunity and the Office of Outdoor Recreation, which is now over in Division of Recreation in the Division of Natural Resources, have been the primary funnel for a lot of those resources. So while we provide a lot of the data and the research behind it, I would say Tara and Pitt and their resources that really allow those local municipalities and those counties to get money on the ground to invest in ways that those local municipalities actually want to do. And it's not by any top-down approach of saying, this is the way that the state thinks that you should invest in outdoor recreation. It's really those local communities coming to the state with proposals to say, well, this is what we think is important. So in Sanpete County or Paiute County, it's local ATV trails, and in other locations, it's beaches and more non-consumptive forms of outdoor recreation. Yeah.
My question has to do with the authority of the resource itself, which is not visitors, but how much that resource can accommodate and still be the resource people are going to. It doesn't seem like any of that comes into play in the research that you're doing for the data quantification, and yet visitor use management seems to be critical to understand what that resource can hold to not be degraded. Where would one get the full composite picture to
I think so the question was, where do we really start to get at some of these issues of capacity on either federal or state lands? Capacity is a really difficult issue to completely tackle, because any type of use of our federal lands causes some type of impact. And so it's really up to those land management agencies to determine what are the desired outcomes, what are the desired resource conditions that they want to manage to. So we often talk it with our students or with our partners in that Central Wasatch project that I had mentioned. They had originally wanted us to do a capacity study. How many people can you get up Little Cottonwood and still have the types of outdoor recreation participation that people, or outdoor recreation experiences that people want to participate in? And I'm like, that's not a question that science can answer you. That is a completely value-laden question that's ultimately up to the managers to determine what do they want that resource to look like.
No, but my question was the environment itself, the trees, the water, the trails, not what do I like, but can that trail accommodate without being hurt, without being whatever? Can it be a motorized trail, or does it need to stay a foot trail because of the terrain itself?
Yeah.
Those kinds of things, which to me seems like a science question. Are you saying that's not?
Well, it is, and the example that I showed from Central Wasatch, where we saw the trends in the trail class conditions, And when we start to see monitoring data that comes back looking like that, where you're seeing most of the trails are at a class 4 or a class 5, they're really beat up, they're really poor looking trails, like that's an indication that you have something going on, that you either have no management in place, or you have not allocated resources in a way that allows you to manage the amount of use that's already happening on those trails. So instead of managing them for the types of use that you currently are, you either need to change use and rehabilitate some of those trails, or you need to harden some of those trails so they become something completely different. So through science, we're able to determine what those indicators are, how we can best monitor those conditions, and then it's ultimately up to the managers to say, well, if I see a trend like that, if I see all my trails are class 4 or class 5, or see water quality data that's starting to decline at abnormal levels, that's when I need to either close areas or start to rehab areas. But yeah, we do collect data in a monitoring effort to better understand the ways that those decisions can be made. Yeah.
So talking about capacity and how we're having problems with that and canyons and things, at what point do you start collecting data to maybe start building more recreation opportunities in the Oakers? Is it now or is it 5 years from now?
It is definitely now. I've talked a lot with Ralph Becker, who is the chairman of the Central Wasatch Commission, about his long-standing effort and involvement in outdoor recreation within the Central Wasatch. And I would have advised him, if I could, that you needed a visitor use study of this area back in the 1970s, before ALTA was created, or during while ALTA was still being created. And that's when we really need to start to think about, what are these experiences? Because what we see in a lot of these areas is that people will get acclimated to what experiences are being offered to them. If you have to wait 2 hours to get up Little Cottonwood, people will wait 2 hours to get up Little Cottonwood. It's going to be a different type of person that's going to wait to do it, but you'll still have those lines. So that's what we tell people, is it's ultimately, you have to decide what those experiences are that you want that landscape to provide. Otherwise, you're just going to have areas where people are getting accustomed to overcrowding and overuse. And that's great in some locations. Some areas you want a lot of people. You want to concentrate use in areas so that those ecological impacts don't actually happen. So those decisions need really to start to be thought about years in advance before visitation starts to happen. And I think if we're starting to think really strategically down the road, the Oakers might start to have a lot of those development issues. You look at the areas that are around Utah Lake now, on the west side of Utah Lake, that 20 years ago, we would have probably said, nobody will ever participate in outdoor recreation in West Mountain on the south side of Utah Lake, right? And now it's like, there's local municipalities trying to buy those areas from the BLM because they're such a high value outdoor recreation assets. Yeah.
So my question is about access of lower economic groups. And, well, let me see, I submitted a question. So I'd be interested to know what the age groups and the breakdown of users is for different economic groups, and even what the projection is and what the projection for enabling use by younger groups and lower socioeconomic groups.
That's a great question. And one thing that we, I think might have had mentioned in our State of Outdoor Recreation report, or the outdoor recreation portion of the report that was for the Institute of Land, Water, and Air, was that Utah by far has the youngest participation rate as far as age breakdown, age demographic goes, in participation in outdoor recreation. And we make a strong argument in there that this opens up opportunities for the state legislature to think about creative ways, not to get young people outside, because most likely they're already participating in outdoor recreation in some way, although there's a strong opportunity for that. But there's also a great opportunity to get them outside in ways that encourage them to be stewards of the natural landscape, to better understand ways that they can understand what's going on in a local ecosystem. What are those, how is that local forest and local vegetation actually filtering water and providing water quality? So I think that Utah has a very unique demographic that can be capitalized on when it comes to encouraging and advocating for education and using our vast public lands as a laboratory to make that education happen.
do we have a sense of what the groups are besides age-oriented, what other demographics are? I represent an area that is majority minority, and I'm interested to know, like, how many brown kids are in the Wasatch Front trails?
Yeah, we do have some data on that, and I'd be happy to share it with you. And what we see is that in urban locations across the state, there is a vast underrepresentation in participation in outdoor recreation from those racial and ethnic minorities. So they either don't have access, or they don't have the connections to those landscapes. But in more rural locations of the state, that doesn't tend to be the case. But for certainly here along the Wasatch Front, there is a notable drop or underrepresentation in outdoor recreation participation amongst minorities. And so that's a great opportunity for, if we're going to strategically invest in equitable access to outdoor recreation, those areas, those investments should be made in our urban areas where those populations tend to be and where they are not participating in outdoor recreation already. All right, I think we're good on questions, so I'll turn it back over to Lisa.
First, let's have a round of applause. I think many of us could stay and discuss these issues for quite a while longer and their importance to the state. But we just want to say thank you for being here today. As we said at the beginning, this is our first in-person event in 2 years, and we're just so excited that we could share it with you. Representative Owens, thank you so much for your participation. We want to make you aware of upcoming landscapes events. On August 4th, we will have Professor Matt Yost from Utah State University share findings on agriculture, water use, and management practices that will promote resiliency in our changing climate. And then on November 3rd, the topic is going to be the Great Salt Lake. Professor Joanne Entwada will share the work she's been doing on creating watershed management solutions to help save some water from what many are calling a drying lake. In the meantime, we also have a second research outreach series called Blue Plate Research, and on June 7th, that will return in person at the Galavan Center. That series focuses on health and well-being, and the upcoming event in June on the 7th will focus on adolescent bullying, a topic I think we also know is important, and our speaker will be Professor Diana Meter. Finally, I would like you to look at your table. On your table is a card. It's asking for some feedback for us. If you could just take a minute. We'd like to hear your feedback and suggestions on this event. And you can just drop that by the door, by the table where you picked up your name badge as you leave. Please also return your name badge, as we will recycle those name badge plastic pieces. So with that, again, thank you for being here. Enjoy some more food, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Landscapes event. Thank you.